So tell me about your kids. Who are they? What are they like as little people?
So I have 2 kids. My son is 8. His name is Aloe. And my daughter is Opal. She's 6. They are very rambunctious, very independent children, very intelligent, very self-starter type of children because I'm a single mom. And I needed them to be more on the independent side for their age. So they're very creative and just all around great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you navigate the constantly changing phases that they go through?
Let's see. Well, every day is a challenge, number one.
Yes.
Yes. Every week is a challenge. Every night. No, I'm kidding. How do I navigate? So, well, number one, as a parent, you have to be flexible, right?
Yeah.
So you can't have any expectations. Like I learned, like early on, I had to release what my expectations of what their milestone should be. And not based on like a book or what you see other people do, and not even based on like my own growth and development as a child. They each have their own story, their own way that things pan out. For example, like, you know, my son Aloe, they're both very, very intelligent, but it took me a long time to get everyone else in the school system, like his teachers and everything, to really see it, because he was so he did not fare well socially at first. So we had to work on him socially as a toddler, as a first grader, as a kindergartner. But once we got that under control, or at least to where we helped him to understand like what his routine should be. We'd implement routines and all that.
How did you like help him understand like the importance of a routine and just like what that would mean for his success?
So that was the thing. Okay, so me personally, I'm very much like my daughter. We're both alike. We can formulate our own routine. We can formulate our own plan of action. But my son doesn't function that way. He doesn't function the way the world functions, period. He has his own way of doing things. And so when you try to push him into our way of doing things, it just was chaos. But he actually is higher functioning than the rest of us. So it wasn't that I needed to teach him how to have structure. It was that we didn't have enough structure for him in place. And so meaning he needs organization. He needed all of his toys organized in one way. He needed to know exactly what he was going to receive for, you know, like not a reward system, but meaning, why am I doing this? He needs to understand exactly why things are happening. He needs to wake up every morning at the same time and have breakfast. He needs to make sure he's on time for the bus. He hates being on late. He has to sit in the first row or whatever. So he likes to get his good seat. Like, he is very structured. And so me, I'm super disorganized, like super lazy. I don't care about like clutter or just, you know, plans for the day. And he is not like that. He's type A personality. So that's what I mean. It wasn't about, you know, me trying to force habits that are like structured for society on him. It was about learning that, oh my goodness, he's actually type A. That's why he's going crazy, because we are a hot mess in here. And
Okay.
so I had to learn how to be that kind of person for him. And then all of a sudden everything just like clicked with him and he took off running.
Okay. All right. So can you tell about Aloe's birth? What was that like?
Oh, the birth. Aloe's birth was super easy. It was a vaginal birth, and I had plans not to have any epidural or anything. Just wanted to have a completely all-natural birth. Wow. But I also knew, since it was my first child, I have no clue about anything. I have to be open to everything. And so his birth went extremely well, simply because I walked so much when he was born. Well, before he was born, I lived in New York City, and then I moved back to my hometown in Wilmington right before, so that I could have him when I was about 7 months pregnant. So I walked all the time. I mean, every day, as much as I could. And then by the time I was too tired to do so, he was born almost on the due date. And I went into preterm labor at home. And because I was with my mom and she had 4 kids already, as I started to like get nervous about going to the hospital and say I was ready to go, she was like, no, you're not ready to go. You're not ready to go. You know, the contractions weren't close enough together. So even though I was really nervous and I was in a lot of pain, it started, I want to say the pain started about 4 o'clock in the morning on a Friday night, and he was born at 4 p.m. on Saturday that morning. So I got really bad contractions. I couldn't sleep, and then by the time around 6 a.m., 7 a.m., I'm walking. She started walking me around the house, up and down the stairs, around the house. She's like, you gotta get through this part, and then when we get close together, we'll take you to the hospital. So she ended up taking me to the hospital when my mucus plug broke.
Okay.
Around 10 o'clock, and they admitted me. I got there around 10:30. They admitted me at noon.
Okay.
Because they said I still wasn't ready.
Oh God. Okay. So can I ask you 2 questions first? Like, what was it like to have to kind of like work through the pain and always be like thinking, oh well, I'm ready now. So
the pain of the contractions weren't that bad, and that's how my mom knew I wasn't ready. But for me, as a first-time mom, it was horrible.
Okay.
But now that I have 2 children and now that I've been through it twice, I can tell you it was basically like a Braxton Hicks at first.
Okay.
And so it was just sharp pains, and you knew something was happening because it kept coming, but they weren't coming fast enough. And so she was like, so I called one of my friends, and this is how I worked through it. And my friend had just had a baby, and she said to make sure I eat a full meal. So my mom made me breakfast. She said because when you get to the hospital, they don't let you eat. And I didn't know that, so my mom made me like eggs and toast and pancakes and like all this food. And I ate as much as I could. And then I took a shower, and then I just moved slowly, doing things all the time, like packing up my bags, making sure they were fixed properly, making sure I had everything I needed. And I'm like, okay, I need to go now. I couldn't wait anymore. And then we went, and then when I got to the hospital, they had me just wait for a little bit and walk around a little bit. And then they were like, okay, you're ready. So basically I just kept busy and I ate a lot and drank a lot of water.
Okay. And then so when your mucus plug broke, this might be gross, but what was that like? Was it like what they see in the movies, like this splash of like water,
so
or like
with
blood,
okay, gotcha. So with my son, I didn't have my water break, just my mucus plug.
Okay.
With my son, the doctor broke my water.
Okay.
But the mucus plug was just like I was taking a shower, getting ready to go to the hospital, and there was like a residue, like a gooey residue that was kind of bloody and like phlegmy coming out of my nether regions.
Okay.
And it was kind of like a lot, like goopy stuff, but it wasn't like, I knew it wasn't my water breaking because it wasn't like a flush.
Okay.
It was just enough to, it was like almost like spotting on, or it was like a mix of like the placenta kind of.
It was just like slimy, gooey stuff.
Yeah, and that means things are expanding.
Okay.
And so I started to freak out. My water broke. Mom was like, yeah, your water's not broken.
Oh my God.
But it's time to go because you don't want oxygen, or now water could potentially break. You need to get going.
Okay.
So they admitted me, and I'm in the labor and delivery. I'm on the bed, and the doctors kept coming in and checking on me, but basically there was no change, and so they broke my water. And then once they broke my water, contractions started to really speed up, and then they kept pressuring me to get an epidural, and I didn't want to. And then the doctor was a female, and she said she herself had just given birth, and that there's no prize. I remember she said, there's no prize for working through the pain. We have drugs for this. And I'm like, all right. So she convinced me and I got the epidural, but I was almost too late because I was not able to stay very still because of the contractions. So then the nurse kind of held me down and I had to breathe through the contractions while they administered the epidural. And then once they administered the epidural, I just couldn't feel my legs. I felt like jelly. They were really, really, really heavy. And then, and that's when they broke my water, actually. And I just remember the bed got super warm, and that's all I could really feel was like warmth. And then I just remember they were like push. Like I couldn't really feel it. I could feel up here like something is happening. So it's still painful. Like you could still feel the pain of the labor, but it wasn't. I've been through a natural birth as well, so it wasn't the same.
Okay.
Because I didn't like the sensation of not being able to move my legs, or just not knowing what's going on down there. I hated it actually.
Uh-huh.
And then I still was in a lot of pain. So by the time they gave me the epidural, she put Pitocin in my fluid, in my IV.
To speed it up.
And so then he was born like that.
Oh my God.
And I had to push, and I pushed 3 times. And he came out, and they put him on my chest, and then cut the cord. And I remember I could hold him, I could nurse him, but I couldn't walk around much because I was still, recovering from the epidural.
Yeah.
And I just didn't like that. Like I didn't need it because basically I felt all the pain because they administered it too late.
Uh-huh.
So by the time they administered it and then they put the Pitocin, he was born. So I went through 12 hours of being on an epidural, and 11 of those hours I had already delivered a baby. So
Wow.
I didn't need to have it. I wasn't a good candidate for it
Yeah.
because I had already suffered through all of the pain.
Why do you think that there was so much pressure to like?
They just wanted me to get it over with. And so I vowed that the next time I had a baby, I wouldn't do any of that.
Yeah, I feel
Because
like
I could handle it.
a lot of exactly. I mean, also like a lot of times you see, with the maternal health crisis that's happening in the United States, there's a lot of pressure. Doctors are pressuring women to like, get their epidural, put the Pitocin, induce labor, and it's causing a lot of problems and sometimes like death.
Yeah.
So, okay. Wow. Or how was Opal's birth different from Aloe's?
Well, there are a couple things. After Aloe's birth, also, they injected me with a depot shot, and that was the first time I got birth control in my whole life, and it was a horrible experience.
Did they tell you of that? Or
They did that same thing they do when you're very vulnerable and you don't know much as a new mom. You need to do this, you need to do this, it's really good for you. They kept having doctors come into my room and talk to me while I was holding my brand new baby, that I needed to get on birth control. And so I just said yes, finally, and they just injected me with it. And then I did one, you're supposed to do 3 a year injections or something like that. I just did, that was the only one I've ever done in my life. I didn't do any more. But Opal's birth was different for many reasons. Number one, because of that experience, I decided to give birth to her in a Catholic hospital.
Okay.
That way, they have rules. They don't pressure you to do anything. They don't pressure you to have an epidural unless it's necessary for the baby's safety. They don't pressure you to get Pitocin. They don't pressure you to use birth control. And they have a whole wing for natural birth. So, and you can get a doula and all that.
Okay.
You can get a midwife. They have midwives on staff. So if you're a good candidate, you do not have to go into labor and delivery in a traditional sense, but it is only down the hall from the birthing center. So that way, if there's something goes wrong, you're still in the hospital. That's what I liked about it.
Okay.
And then they could just run over and take care of you. So that's already how her birth was completely different because it was a safer space in my opinion. And then the room even wasn't decorated like a hospital bed. It was decorated like a beautiful hotel room.
Okay.
Like a bed and breakfast.
Uh-huh.
So I basically had her in a bed and breakfast.
Okay.
It was really lovely. And they also believed in shared space. So when Opal was born, it was just me and my parents. Her dad wasn't even there because he couldn't make it. He was like out of town.
Okay.
And then, but then when Opal was born, it was me, her dad, and Aloe. We were all in the room when Opal was born.
Wow.
Yeah, he saw everything.
Okay.
And they were able, and they never left the room. I mean, technically, Aloe wasn't supposed to be there when she was born, but because it happened so quickly, there was no time to remove him from the room, so their dad just had to hold him.
Okay.
And they witnessed everything, and when she came out to all of us, and they really believed in that anyway. And then when I went into the, your little 36-hour incubation period,
yeah,
they put a bed for father and for other children next to your bed, so you can all sleep together, and the baby has a bassinet in the middle, so we all sleep together.
Okay.
Yeah. So
nice.
it was just a much better experience.
Okay.
And it was a vaginal birth, so no drugs, nothing. She was born in 45 minutes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
By then I was more less of a novice, so I did all my laboring at home.
Okay.
And I only went when my contractions were backbreaking and I couldn't stand up anymore.
Okay.
And then I went to the hospital, which was very close, like 5 minutes away.
Okay.
And then her head was already coming down.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I just did 3 pushes
Woo.
and that was it.
All right.
Yeah, no
bada
drugs,
bing, bada boom.
nothing. I was so happy. It was much more painful. It was the after pain because I didn't have that before.
Yeah.
But I knew everything else, right?
The after the uterus contracts
yes.
back and like all the placentas that
yeah,
delivered.
I felt very nauseated. But it was okay. It wasn't like not tolerable or anything. They just gave me some Motrin. It was fine.
Okay.
But I didn't, every other pain, my brain recognized because I went through delivery, remember, with Aloe, before the epidural kicked in.
Okay.
But then by the time it kicked in, it was the afterbirth. So I didn't feel that. So that was the most uncomfortable part because I was feeling it for the first time. But it wasn't hard to push or anything. It wasn't that bad. Labor is not as worse as being pregnant.
Okay. And being pregnant for me was horrible.
It's just the worst thing I've ever been through in my life.
It was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what can you tell us about like your support system and like the people that were around you like help you? Yeah.
So for my children, their father had already had a child.
Okay.
So he was like an expert baby caretaker. Also his sister, who's basically like a twin, even though they're a couple years apart, she had like 5 kids, so he helped her take care of her kids because a set of them are twins. So she needed a lot of support, and they all lived in a family house when she started having children, very young. So everyone had to partake. So he's very, very good at taking kids, thankfully for me. So I had a large amount of support when my children were born. On top of that, I lived with my mom. We lived with my mother when my son was born, and then we moved into our own place when he was like 4 or 5 months old. And then by the time I had my daughter, I didn't want to live with anyone else because I had already created like my own nest. So I didn't need to do that same scenario where I moved in with my mom, which I did on purpose because I just wanted to get all of her wisdom.
I did too.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I just really wanted that. I feel like that's something really special if you're able to get that. But support system was great. My mom taught me so much. She taught me bath bottle bed, and it has never faltered. even as my children are 6 and 8, it is now bath dinner bed.
Right.
Or however you want to work it, dinner bath bed. But keep those 3 together, and this is the one thing she told me, and it has literally shaped my parenting. Okay. She told me that everything I do with the children, no matter what I do, make sure I do it at the same time every single day from the time they're born. It will create structure and it will create a schedule. So therefore, she said, decide right now that your child is here, what time you want them to wake up every single day, your whole life. And what time you want them to go to sleep, go be to bed by every single day. I said, well, I definitely want them in bed, She's like, think about when they're in school, what time do you want them to go to bed? Oh, I want them to go to bed by 8 o'clock.
Right.
And she says, okay, then at 7 o'clock every night or 6:30 every night, start the process of bath bottle bed, bath bottle bed, bath bottle bed. So that's what I did with my son, and I'm telling you this right now, since he was born and since my daughter was born, they wake up at 7 o'clock every morning and they go to bed at 7 o'clock every night. Their eyes get heavy, and I've never had to try because I did that from when they were both children every single night.
Wow. That's awesome.
And so even last night, like, I had a client here, it was late, I do consulting, and she was like, your children are so good. And I'm like, why? Because they, 8 o'clock, good night, Mom.
Bye.
And they go to sleep on their own.
Yeah.
Because they can't handle it. They don't even know what it's like to be up late.
Yeah, that's how I was as a kid. My mom said, like, right around 8, I was like, all right, I'm going to go put myself to bed.
Right. And they do it all on their own because that is how it's been every night since they were born.
Yeah.
Every night. Even if I couldn't get them to sleep, I just pat their backs until they fall asleep. Lights out. Lights out at 7. Lights out at 7. So now it's varies because they go to school, but it's 8:30.
Okay. That's fair.
But that's what my support system taught me, how to have structure, how not to freak out.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's so much.
There's so much to freak out about.
Yes. Was it a huge transition from being a mother of one to a mother of two?
No, much easier than being a mother of one.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It was a better transition because now I had a toddler, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the toddler, what happens when you have a toddler and they don't have any siblings is you become their sibling as mom. And I'm not a toddler's best friend. I'm sorry. I can play with you. I only have so much of my time I can give to you, though. I'm sorry. I'm really strict on maintaining my independence as a mom. So, because you just get so swallowed up in your kids' lives and it becomes your life, and that was never my life. So I'm very strict on maintaining my independence. So I take a certain amount of alone time every day, and I taught them how to be alone too. And it works for us. So I said to myself, I have to have another baby because my son was relying on me too much for companionship. And I couldn't blame him because he's home alone with me all day because I was stay at home mom. So I had another baby and it worked.
Good.
And also, she has a completely different temperament. So it gave me, it was a balancing act. It changed my perspective on children a lot because my son was very much a handful, and my daughter was a very independent self-starter. She didn't need me for much. So it helped me to be a better parent to him and to her because I had already had boot camp with him. And by the time she came, she was a walk in the park, but her needs are more complex because she needed more mental health and energy, So it was good.
Okay, all right. Okay, a lot of women, including myself, are scared to death of like having a daughter.
Oh.
Not because there's anything wrong with having a daughter so much as I feel like sometimes it's a question of like, oh man, like all the bad stuff that I did as like a little girl is just like maybe I'm gonna get all that attitude and all that stress that I put on like my parents and other people around me. I'm gonna get all that back, like karma.
Mm-hmm.
And so like what were your thoughts when you first met your baby daughter?
Well, I wanted a daughter terribly.
Okay.
Yeah, and so when I did the ultrasound and they said there's a girl, I was just so relieved.
Okay.
Because I have the most rambunctious young son. I mean, he just so much energy. He's a boy's boy. He's the kind of boy that will go outside and come back inside covered in mud. Okay. That kind of. He's like, Mom, I've got a salamander. And it's like, what's that? And so. It was really, I can make it up. I mean, I'm serious. Like, he collects rocks and bugs.
Oh my God.
He's very much a builder and a hands-on type of personality. Loud and boisterous and attention-getting and all that. So, he wasn't very much like me, but something told me if I had a daughter, she'd be like me. And I was right. She came out just like me. So, it was not so hard to navigate having a daughter, but I will say my son, there'll be an uproar or some type of upset or some type of situation that's big, right? And then we'll have to calm it down. My daughter's the polar opposite. It's all calculated, and my son we might get into an argument, right? But then we talk about it and it always ends in I love you, Mommy, and a hug. Not with my daughter. My daughter, she always wins. I don't win. I've never won. Not one time. It's even if I say, okay, are you happy now? No. don't talk to me. It's just a completely different, there is no resolution. I've noticed that with my son, there's always a resolution. There's always even last night, he got angry and he didn't, you know what? I don't even like my mommy anymore. And I'm like, whatever. And then he came back, I can't believe I said that, mommy. I am so sorry. I really love you. It's okay. I didn't believe you anyway. Then he wants to help me take out the trash and he wants to help me do this. But if the same thing happens with my daughter and she gets mad, or I tell her she can't have something and she's like, you know what? You're a mean mommy. That sticks for an entire day until I tell her I'm sorry. It's a different dynamic with a female. Yep. Silent treatment, attitude, and there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. And I actually had a conversation about this on the Christmas holiday with my cousins. They were like, isn't it different having a daughter than a son? They're like, you'll see, like, your son is going to be so easy when they're older, when they're teenagers, because they have teenagers. They're like, when your daughter is a teenager, watch out. They're so sneaky and conniving. They get away with everything. Because they're so calculated.
Oh my God.
You know, she goes to school. She's never gotten in trouble. I go to the parent-teacher conference. They told me it was 5 minutes long. They're like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. She is our brightest student, and she helps teach the other kids. In fact, she's kind of a know-it-all, so you might want to tell her to slow down.
Tone it down a little.
But we're good at redirecting, so she's fine. And she's like, I never get in trouble. Can you buy me this, that, and the third? And she'll make a whole long list. So it's just a different dynamic. It's a different, whereas my son is, can I please have this? And I'm like, no, you have to earn it, and then he'll earn it. Whereas she's like, I already earned it.
So give it to me.
Yeah. It's different. It's different dynamic.
Okay.
Yeah. But more, I will say, she's more grounded.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Can you speak on what it's been like to parent through, like, both you and your children's grief?
So in 2018, well, I should say in November of 2017, my father took ill, and then 2 months later he passed away from cancer. And then that kind of ripple affected my mother, who had been ill for a while, and it increased her illness, and she took ill 2 months after that. So he passed away in January of 2018, and then she almost passed away in February of 2018, and then she went on hospice, and then she passed away in September. And up till that point, my children had never even had a babysitter besides my mother or my father, or me, or one of my siblings. So we're very, very close. And so that was very difficult, more so for my son than my daughter, because he processes his grief a little more outward than she does. And then on top of that, he was older, so he could understand more what was going on. And it required a lot of, honestly, to be honest, kids are resilient. He wasn't the problem. It was his teachers that were the problem, in my opinion, because he ended up having to be held back from school that year, so he did kindergarten twice. Okay. And then they didn't have much patience for him because he was rather disruptive, but he couldn't focus, you know. And it was like, yeah, it was always coming back to the question of, does he need meds, or does he need therapy, or does he need all these things? And I kept trying to explain to them he needs time. He lost his best friend, his grandma, my mother. And it was like no one could understand that. I couldn't understand how an elderly person could be best friends with a 5-year-old. And that's just how our family is. We're West Indian, we're different. You know, we're very close-knit. We're not, like American culture, it's everyone is separate, right? But in West Indian culture, we all lived in the same house. We all live in the same house. We all take care of each other. My mom picked them up from school every day, made them breakfast every morning, and you know what I mean? Like, so it was an adjustment. We changed our home space as well. We changed our living space. We moved. We got a new car, and he started a new school. So It was like a train wreck of transition.
Yeah.
And he doesn't handle transition well, so he really didn't settle into a routine at school until May. That's when it all clicked, and he was like, yeah, he needs to repeat this process. However, it's been a blessing that he did. He might even skip. He's doing so well. But the parenting through that was, number one, probably the best thing that could have happened to me, because it made me have to place my grief. It gave me some direction, right? Like when you're a parent, you can't stop being a parent. So it was like I couldn't stop my routine because the kids would fall by the wayside, even though I may have wanted to lay in bed all day and not move, right? Mm-hmm. I couldn't do that because they had to go to school, or they had to go, they still have to grow and develop. And they actually counseled me. They would tell me, Mom, you're just sad all the time. We really want you to be happy. We know. It got to the point where they were the ones telling me, like, we know Grandma's gone, but Grandma's in heaven. And they became relentless about it, which let me know, children are really resilient. Like, I have to be more like them.
They teach you.
Yeah. And what I did is I actually put myself in a position where I paid my rent 6 months in advance. So I would take them to school, and then I could just, be still all day with my thoughts if I needed to. And I didn't have to necessarily go to work for the purpose of paying rent, So that way I could take a part-time job and just have more time to myself. But parenting through that, we had to develop new routines. We had to develop our own routines. We had to develop our own new friend circle. We had to get new play dates and new parents that, specifically, I became closer friends with people who had gone through what I'd gone through as well, mm-hmm. and that had children also, so we could help each other, mm-hmm. And fill up their days a little bit more, so they're not sitting around thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't as bad as you think. It's a lot of explaining. You need to be open. You need to have open dialogue with your kids, and also they got to see Grandma and Grandpa deteriorate, which was hard for them and it was emotional for them, but they were able to process life and death. Mm-hmm. I didn't have to explain, well, they're gone. Right. What happened? What do you mean they're gone?
They got to kind of see it.
Right. Instead, they were like, no, she's really sick, Mom. We don't like seeing her like that. Like, she's going to go, isn't she? Like, yeah, they're like, okay, well, we don't like seeing her like that. It scares us. And mm-hmm. we want her to feel better. And so she might not get better. And they're like, oh, they understood. Then she goes into the ground? Yes, she goes into the ground, and they just understood. And then they went to the funeral and they were amazed. They're like, Grandma knows all these people? Wow, all these people loved Grandma, and it made them feel really proud. Mm-hmm. So it's unfortunate. You don't want them to go through this, but it's like we have certain rituals as a culture that really matter, and it helped them in their process.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have, or would you give mothers who are in a similar position to you, who have to parent through grief or anxiety or even depression?
Well, you have to take care of yourself first and foremost. If you don't, I went to therapy. I actually was forced to sit still because 2 weeks after my mother passed away, I sprained my ankle, so I couldn't even move. And it forced me to sit with my thoughts. And I ended up going to therapy. I didn't like therapy, but I did go to physical therapy. That helped, actually, because it got me moving. And I remember I wore a crystal on my neck that I bought. And the therapist, he was like, oh, I like the physical therapist. He's like, I like your crystal. I have all these crystals. And he'd had giant ones that were on the wall. He paid a huge amount of money for. He's a collector, and he's from Colorado, of course, free spirit. And you know what? I was like, oh, that's cool. And it helped me get into holistic healing, and it really changed my life. Okay. So I will say, I picked up, whatever you do, pick up something that fuels you and direct your energy towards that so that you can be productive with sorting out your feelings. You can't do it alone.
Yeah.
You can't. So you have to take care of yourself, and then you learn how to help others.
Okay. What is one of the best memories that you've had being a mom?
One of my favorite memories is when my son was young, and my daughter. We lived in Barbados for a little bit with their father's side of the family, and we had a little house on the beach. And we would go to the beach every morning, me and my son. Like, my daughter would sleep late when she was a baby. She was a good sleeper. And so she would late mean she slept until 7 o'clock. So at 5 o'clock when he would wake up, I'm like, want to keep him quiet. And he was about 4 years old. So in an effort to keep him quiet, I would walk him to the beach. And we'd get in the ocean, we'd swim. And one morning we're swimming, and he has a little life jacket on, and he was really good. We'd just stay a little shallow section. And one morning we saw this gigantic mass like moving underneath of us, and I just knew it was a shark and we're gonna die, and that was it. And I was like, don't move, just because there's no blood in the water, right? So I'm like, and it's getting closer, and it's getting closer, and it's getting closer, and I'm not a fast enough swimmer to beat this thing to the shore.
Okay.
So I'm trying not to panic. I'm very good at react first, panic later, but given the car accidents I've been in, I'm good at like okay, got through it, and then major meltdown. So I didn't panic, kind of pulled him close to me. And then all of a sudden, the gigantic mass, this big shadow, moved kind of around us. Like we were in the way, and then kept going. So I immediately jumped out of the water. And at this hour in the ocean, so it's like a 5-star beach, and there's like a big shallow portion before it gets deep. So there are other groups of people in the water, like it's like Muscle Beach, like there's men running around getting hot, and there's like little old people doing synchronized swimming every morning together, a little circle about like, a little bit ways down from us, having like a class. So the mass goes over to the class, right? And I'm like, you're gonna die, watch out. And they're looking at me like, will you be quiet? And they start taking little oranges and throwing it at the mass. And I'm like, what is going on?
What are they doing?
And then I asked somebody on the beach, what are they doing? They're like, it's a sea turtle.
Oh my God.
Oh man. And they come in like hordes too. So if you see one, there's another. Here comes another one. So now instead of running away, we jump back in the water, we put our goggles on, and we're watching them.
Oh my God.
And they're gorgeous. The most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And they're huge. I mean, this thing was like, I want to say 4 feet wide.
What?
A circumference.
Oh my God.
Huge. And
my heart is like beating.
and they just go right underneath you, like, and let me tell you something. Turtles were built for the sea. This thing is so fast. It's not slow, okay? It's not slow. And then I found out that at nighttime they lay eggs on the beach, and Barbados is like one of the last places in the whole world.
The Galapagos too.
Ah, right. There's only a few places where there is enough coral reef surrounding the island to filter the water, and that's where they like to nest.
Okay.
Where it's filtered. And so because they have their coral reef as a natural preserve, they still have a lot of coral reef and preserves that. That's why the water there is like a pool. It's so nice. And the turtles come and they go on the beach and they lay their eggs. And now they said the eggs are dying, and so they would have these parties because there's so many clubs on the beach. There's like there's like literal structures, and then there's about 3 boats that are clubs with all these flashing lights. Turtles can't see when they hatch. They can't see their way back they're blinded by the lights. They can't see their way back to the ocean. They're dying on the shore. So they have these huge parties where you just lead the turtles.
Oh my God.
So that's my favorite memory. Is like going to the turtle leading the turtle party.
Wow, that's so cool.
and feeding the sea turtles, and apparently there's very rare. You don't see them in the world that much. Because there's not many places for them to go.
Oh my God.
So they kind of travel to one place or the other. And
That is so
Barbados.
cool.
Yeah, and they're just so pretty. So pretty.
Yeah.
So gorgeous. I mean, just a gorgeous creature. Yes, gorgeous.
Wow.
And fast and friendly. And they'll come up and eat the little orange. They love oranges. They love mangoes.
Oh my gosh. That is so cool.
And the old people were just like, what are you running for the turtles for? And they're wading in the water doing this thing. It's so funny. Like,
well, how were you supposed to know? You're not like
I didn't know.
there.
We thought we were going to be eaten.
You were just like, all right, well,
yeah,
I'm with my son.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to pray that it's not painful.
Exactly. I was like, I'm just going to hold him, so I'll go first.
Oh my god.
But yeah, that was my favorite like memory with my kid.
Wow.
Yeah. With Opal, we haven't gotten to do much sadly. But we have mommy-daughter days are the best. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
The best. She's such a girly girl.
Okay.
Yeah. And she's a really good dancer.
Okay.
She does ballet. So she's ready. She's ready for the world. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions that I had.
Thanks for having me.
Yay! Thank you so much, and I appreciate it. All right. Thank you.